welcome so much, Cara, over to be my second guest for this series for the Unlocking Website Success series. Today, we're going to be talking about branding, which is a huge piece of the puzzle of websites. We're talking about so many different pieces throughout the series, but I think that branding is one of those just really, really critical ones. But I think that branding is one of those just really, really critical ones. But I think that branding is one of those. Sorry, I don't know. Can you hear a feedback loop?
Yes, I can. That's okay.
Sorry. Do you have two tabs open still?
I can. That's okay.
Sorry. Do you have two tabs open still?
I can. No.
Do you have two tabs open still?
No.
Oh my gosh. Do you have two tabs open still?
I'll leave and rejoin.
Oh my gosh. Do you have two tabs open?
Rejoin.
Oh my gosh. Do you have two tabs? Hello? Okay, sorry for those of you who are here live with us, hopefully. She's going to rejoin in a second, and I can't hear the feedback loop on my end, so I'm going to hope it's a problem with Cara. But Cara is a branding expert. If you follow her, her brand is so joyous, it's so friendly, it's so professional, it's so intriguing, and it's very, very clear and consistent about who she is, what she does, who she helps, how she helps. Her work, if you look at her portfolio, if you look at the clients that she's had, they're also just really, really, you can just see the quality of her work. You can see the expertise behind what she does. I'm going to add her back right now. Hello, welcome back.
Hi, sorry about that.
No worries. I've just been doing a bit of an intro for you while we've been talking. From my perspective of things, I'd love for you to do one of yourself as well, but just of what I see about your work being really approachable, but also really obviously professional, very knowing. Once I used a word before that has gone out of my head, but just very, you have obviously are quite expert in what you do, but you very, I don't know, it's just a lot friendlier and a lot more warm than I think some people. What I love right now is that you're doing a whole series also on values behind branding, which is just something that is so. I've got a whole. I want to do a whole video in this series about values in your website and bringing those to the forefront as well. So, anywho, I would love for the audience to hear a little bit about who you are, your story, how you got here, what it is you do, who you help, that kind of bio type thing.
Yeah, great. Well, first of all, thank you for saying that. It's really lovely because that's very much one of my missions is to take branding, which can sometimes be seen as a bit of a layered thing, a difficult thing, a thing to crack, a mystery, and to really demystify it and make it simple. A short version of the story is basically my background is working in ad agencies for brands like the Times newspaper, Super Nanny. I had some hotel chains as well. But basically, very early on in my career, I kind of realized that wasn't doing it for me. I got massive burnout, and I realized that I wanted to. Basically, I had been part of a digital marketing team in general, and then I realized I was actually in the swimming pool one day, and it came to me that the area that I was most interested in is people's relationship with brands. Because I think that it's a lot to do with trust. It's a lot to do with psychology. I think it can be passed on. My dad was a brand cynic. He would go for the own brand, cheapest of everything. And yet he would always buy me a Denman hairbrush. He would always go for Listerine, mouthwash. There were certain brands that for him spoke to him. And I found it interesting to unpick what it was about, the stories that he related to, and then other people as well. And I thought there's just such a good way to help people who are setting up their businesses simplify this, because basically, yes, it's all smoke and mirrors, but I've seen behind the curtain of the smoke and mirrors, and I know exactly the components you need. And basically putting out an image there of the brand you want to be is just, I'm not going to give it an exact sort of fraction, but let's say it's 2/3 of the way of getting there. It's like in terms of mindset and approach, but also attracting those people. So I think that for small businesses and individuals and solo entrepreneurs, it's really important because it's about being able to portray, yourself in a certain way to then make that reality, whether that's going from sort of a side hustle into it being a full-time thing or, scaling up. I'm really sorry, Ali, I can't hear your audio.
I muted myself so I could drink my cup of coffee without,
Oh no.
and then
Okay.
forgot without like interrupting you and like swallowing noises. And so here I am. I was just saying that I know from my own experience with my small business, like I have a fairly good eye for design. I ended up being a website designer. And before that, even, I was, so I have a decent eye for design, but so I designed what I thought would be like this brand that I would love. And I spent all this time and energy building a brand. And then I like, within a year, I hated it. It just felt so not me. It felt so, I don't know, like everyone else was doing it. It just felt so kind of cookie cutter. And also like it was very much and I had nothing against these. I'm just gonna say this first, but it was very much like a teal, gold, and gray brand. And there are a lot of teal, gold, and gray brands out there. And it just felt so like, I don't know. And so instead of leveling up that brand, when I decided to pay someone to do my brand for me, I was like, I wear burgundy every single day. Like I've been wearing burgundy every single day since before I put it. It was my wedding color. Like I'm obsessive about burgundy. We're going with burgundy. And so that has now stood, for another 4 years of my business. I haven't felt the need to change it. And it's not just because I went burgundy and it's a natural part of me, but because the brand was designed professionally to be timeless. It's not trendy, really. It's very, very me because it was designed by a very good friend. So
I think that it not being trendy point is so key because I think that's one of the biggest pitfalls really is sort of jumping on a bandwagon of styles. And that is the immediate way to not stand out if you think about it. And also not be authentic, like you said. I mean, for a personal brand, it's slightly different from if it was more of a B2B or business brand or B2C brand. But when it's a personal brand, it is personal. You've got to like it. It's got to reflect you. And I mean, if you're always wearing your brand color as well, then that gives you greater, brand awareness. Like it's almost like you're doing a job of being, presenting your brand. Obviously, it's just a color you love, but but I think, yeah, there's there's a lot of logic in that. Like, so for me, my blue in my brand, I have quite a colorful brand. Actually,
I love it.
it's interesting because actually my brand, I have noticed parallels between my brand and my personality and also my personal style. And I've noticed, and even interior taste, and I've noticed more of an overlap over the last few years. Because I work in a visual field, I feel like I'm spoiled for design. I sometimes don't feel like I know my taste because I like so many things. But yeah, I've noticed that very much sort of having a sort of light, bright background with pops of color is very me in almost all parts of my life. So, but yeah, that blue was funny because I was talked out of it in my first brand, and for perfectly good reasons. It's a nightmare to print. It's just not possible to print that blue that vibrant. But that cobalt blue, so my brand blue, for anybody who doesn't know my brands, it's like an electric blue. For me, it speaks to me. Blue is traditionally, well, it's apparently the nation's favorite color. I think in the US as well. I think it's basically the world's favorite color. It's considered trustworthy, etc., etc. That's not why I wanted blue. My blue is energizing and exciting, and
It is. It's very bright. It's not like I was actually having this conversation earlier over lunch with my friends, and about how every time I design sort of somebody in a professional services website, if they don't have a brand of their own, they kind of are like I built a website for somebody who is essentially doing accountancy matching bookkeepers. And I was like, oh, so how does like a really nice green sound? And she's like, no, blue. And I was like,
Right.
okay. But
Right.
professional services love blue. Like they love that trustworthy blue
Right.
color.
Right.
But your blue, you're right. It is not like the traditional kind of navy or kind of gray blue. It is a really bright, electric, energizing, fun blue.
Yeah. And because I rebranded in 2021, and actually that was much more about bringing the fun into my brand,
Mhm.
actually, because before that it was a little bit more, I don't know, sensible and professional. And I think, so that's something I very much believe is that, there's no sort of set way of doing things. I balance that playful part of my brand with obviously knowing my stuff, and then that's the professionalism. So, but yeah, in terms of, websites all looking the same as well, or brand colors, it's like, if your website is your storefront, it is one of the biggest parts of your brand, but also your website is going to evolve and evolve over the time you run your business. Even in the like 2 years you have one website, or 3 years you have one website, you're going to just keep updating blog posts and changing the homepage and just keeping things fresh. Well, that's at least the intention. Sometimes harder to do than to say, but then over the course of a career that might be 10 or 15 years or longer, it might be your lifetime, then you're going to have multiple editions of that website, because things really change. A website in 2010 would look very strange today. Mobile use behaviors, everything changes, and new technologies come on board. So, but basically, when you have a brand that's separate from that, that's it. You have a brand, because when you only have a website that's carrying your brand, then I've even been past sometimes as a starting point a logo, which is a screen grab from their website, because they don't even own the file. And it's not even, sometimes it hasn't been designed. Sometimes it's literally just the typed out site title in
Mhm.
front of the template. And I'm not judging people who need to do that as a first step to get their business out there, test their concept, gain their confidence, gain the first few clients.
Absolutely.
But if you carry on with that, you're going to very quickly realize the limitations of that. You can't take out an ad and use your logo. You can't do social media templates without having, you need to be able to have a brand and then bring that to your website to be embodied in your website, because your brand is, going to see you through, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I firmly believe that there's in your first 6 months probably of business at least, you probably don't need a professionally designed much of anything
Yeah.
because you're still finding yourself. Once you've done that bit, you found yourself, that's when you need a proper brand, you need a proper logo, you need a proper website, and those types of things to really then stand out and to make waves in whatever it is you do or whatever it is that you're offering. Um, like I was telling you this, I have a lot of clients. I have clients with established brands, but they don't really know how to use them. So maybe somebody's done it for them, and then they are not graphically or design savvy enough to really know what to do with that. So I've had clients that have said to me, like, I see your social media posts, and before I read it, I know it's yours. There's no logo on it. But I still know it's yours. And they say, how do you do that? And I said, it's because I use the same exact colors and fonts in everything I do. Right. I wear burgundy all the time. Obviously, I wore it all the time before it was my brand color, but now I wear it even more. I wear it intentionally for video calls. I was at the House of Lords yesterday. I wore it very intentionally because I knew there were going to be professional photos there and that it would be a brand moment as well as a.
Mhm.
So that's a little on the extreme side to
Well,
dress in your
I
brand
used
colors
to
always,
wear
but.
my brand blue for all my online workshops and a lot of
Mhm.
things like that, but I don't as much now because because I kind of let that relax a little. But honestly, it was a very effective tool. People send me things that are bright blue, and if that hasn't registered on a subliminal level with people, if that hasn't connected with people, what your brand is, then I don't know what will. So, in fact, one of my absolute top things is color. and using it to your advantage. I mean, so you've
Mhm.
got your burgundy, and it works for you, it matches you, it makes it makes sense for you, and you love it, and it carries through things. It's a busy old world out there, and we see a lot of different media, a lot of different images, text. Download this, read this, there's a lot going on, and the brain reads color faster than it reads like words or anything else. So your brain will connect something from the color alone, like to begin. So that's why supermarkets have a lot of knockoff brands that very cheekily use very similar colors on their packaging
Mhm.
shapes, because our brain takes in those colors and shapes before anything else. So as a small business, why wouldn't you use that little brain trick to your advantage? So what I always do is I look at all of my clients' competitors and do a visual analysis. And I'll do it, based on their brand values. Like, say your bookkeeping person, if they wanted to be a bit more disruptive in that world, and they were like, oh, I'm going to be the down to earth bookkeeping person, or I'm going to be the bookkeeping person for really busy millennials, rather than sort of a more traditional way of marketing it.
Mhm.
Then we would look at those values, and we would look at what's out there, and we'd say, okay, there's mostly stuffy traditional with a corporate vibe. It's mostly these colors being used. And then we'd go completely the opposite. We'd look at our audience avatars, and that's a key part of what I do, is think about the audience and what what do they know, like, and trust, to kind of gauge things. But then we would inform, I worked with a data consultancy, and
Mhm.
they had purple as their brand color. She was a woman, female owned data agency in a very male dominated world. That's all very well. However, purple is so close to blue that blue and purple were getting used a lot in that industry. Blue,
Mhm.
purple, blue to grey, blue to green, and gradients. So I was like, right, we need to go for a solid colour. And I pitched her, I think, red, yellow, and orange. I was like, just to go the opposite way. I was like, for maximum visibility. And this isn't for everybody, but for maximum visibility, so that when somebody sees your brand, they know it's you, and it's easy
Mhm.
to remember. They land on your website, and there's no confusion whether they've gone to the wrong one. Like, when you're comparing things, like if you're comparing insurance or whatever, and you're looking at a few different websites, it can be easy to forget which ones you've already looked at when they're very similar. So actually, when yours is more different, it makes such a big
Yeah,
splash.
exactly. And I
Yeah.
think that's part of my, like, love of the burgundy thing too, and obviously it happened in a natural way, but there aren't very many burgundy brands out there. There are very few, especially that are women-owned brands. Like, it just doesn't really happen. It is sort of a naturally masculine-y type color, which is fine. That's sort of me anyway in a lot of ways.
I see it as very
But
feminine, but
mhm,
I
but I think it's just because it's this,
think it's because
like,
it's trustworthy, like a corporate. It's
mm,
one of those sort of very traditional corporate colors, maybe, because it's like the deeper colors
mhm.
are often associated with sort of establishment and trust.
Yeah, exactly. And I love what you were saying about creating a lot of playfulness and stuff in brands. In my personal business, obviously, because I have this almost corporate deep, deep, trustworthy color, um, I've gone by using, and one of my two fonts is really playful.
Mhm.
I have taken in my most recent website redesign, have layered some photos, have added some really fun. I had some custom illustrations done. I've got little sections where I've added almost like, not subtext, but like pop, like like on my, like, quote text, almost the things you'd see in parentheses, right? So I've got on my website where I have my headline and then it says, "We never look back. You'll never look back. We promise." Right?
Mm-mm.
But that's not like the main point. It's
Mm.
just they might glance across it and they gives that personality pop, um, and little things like that. So
Your
yeah,
web
just having, I've had to. Hmm?
your website definitely pops with personality. It's
Yeah.
very warm,
Mm,
warm and friendly. And yeah. And it's interesting because actually that goes to show how much of brand isn't just logo, because your
mm.
logo is actually very minimal and clean. So yeah, it's just one part of of the whole pie.
Exactly. So let's talk about that. What are some of the other parts of the pie that somebody should think about when they're doing, when they're preparing to have a website designed? When
Okay.
it, brand wise, obviously.
That's from a brand point of view. Well, it's interesting you say that because I actually have got this that I worked with. I collaborated with a graphic designer and a copywriter a couple of years ago on a really robust chart. Now, I don't want anyone to get scared by this because it's really quite a lot, but it just goes to show that how much is in a brand. So let me see if I can show you this.
Oh my gosh.
I know it's
That
beautiful,
is,
isn't it? Yeah, there's a
but
lot.
it's beautiful.
There's a lot.
And I think the other thing
But
is
that's the key point.
yes.
Is more than just your logo.
Before anyone gets totally freaked out, when I had my brand design, some of these things have evolved more naturally from that brand design. Like I've learned how to use them and I've learned how to probably build some of those other pieces. And obviously, when you work with the professionals, they're going to make sure you have those pieces as well.
Yeah,
So,
totally. Now that was just us nerding out, trying to put it all down into a beautiful infographic,
mhm.
to work out all the different parts of brand foundation, brand identity, tone of voice, brand personality. There's a lot in there. But yeah, I think the most important things are, I think what you said about somebody not needing something before the 6-month point because they don't know what they're about yet is really key, because I think that knowing what you're about, knowing your USP and your audience, your competitors, and and basically how you might want to stand out. Those are the bits of information that you would need to take to somebody like me to work on your branding before a website. Because if you work from that basis of knowing who you are, knowing the landscape, and knowing who you want as your customer, then we can make really confident decisions together. And once basically the branding process is very collaborative, but at the end of it, you should get a really good toolkit that you can then use on a website. Things like, I wouldn't go too early into the visual element. I think, as you say, trusting a professional sometimes to guide on those things is useful, but knowing your brand's personality, knowing exactly sort of what sweet spot between like informal and more formal you might want it to be. I think what you're saying about visual touches on website is so true, because there's it's not just copy that can have like different tone. It's, as you say, the actual design of elements, and even the way things can animate in or load in, or like the section endings, they, whether they're straight or curvy or wiggly, all of those things give very different vibes. So I think having a confident sense of the direction and positioning you want your brand to be is really, really key.
Yeah, absolutely. I've had a few clients in the past that, by the way, absolutely lovely, but they come to me with this idea of, I love this website, but
Mhm.
here are my colors, my brand, the things that I want to do. I want it to be this, but I want it to pop a little bit. And every single time
Mhm.
I should give them the first draft and they're like, I hate it.
Yeah.
And it's because they think they know what they want,
Mm.
but what they really want is, so a lot of times they're like, I want this little pop of color, or I have this font that I really like. And then I
Mhm.
show it to them and they go, no, that's a bit much, isn't it?
Right.
And it's not, it just feels busy to them or loud or off for them. And usually these are people in the wellness industry, and for one reason or another. And so I think, how do you help, what advice would you give to somebody if they were coming into that kind of, they're getting ready to talk to a designer, whether it be web or professional brand designer like yourself, to help them get really clear on those types of things, like how to get really clear on, I want a brand that looks and feels and functions in this way.
Gosh, okay, there's a lot in that. My brain's buzzing because there's loads of routes you can go. And
Yes.
one is, it's always helpful to have an idea of what you like. And I'm very much somebody that screen grabs and bookmarks and saves all the things I like as well. But Pinterest boards are not brand mood boards because they're too varied. And just because you like something in somebody else's logo, what's the most useful thing is working out what it is you like about it or why you like it. So I think if you see something, you might see somebody with a big bubble font 3D logo that's lilac and pink, and it's all very playful and very kind of Y2K. And maybe you look at it and it's not really your brand, but you like it. And why you like it is because it works for that person's brand, because they know who they are and they're confident. So what you're actually looking for is your own confidence and your own route. But if you send that reference to a designer, you're going to end up with lots of styles that look like that. So that's why I always work through the process of looking at your audience. I write a brief, and then the brief, also we sort of work out, the level. So how we pitching this, and it's like, oh, okay, so yours is, professional, but with lots of friendly, warm tips, or whatever. What's that angle, I think the other thing to bear in mind is that I think it is good to see what you like and to collect references, but also not to get too overwhelmed, because it's like I was saying to you at the start of this, I don't even know what I would, what my interior design style would be, because I like so many things. If I put them all in one house, it would probably be mental, so, and that's just natural. It's natural for us to have varied and broad things that we like, and that's okay. And what we like can change as well. So that's why it's about working out more timeless things. What's at the base? Try and look at what there is in common with the things that you like. Are they all a bit more soft and bohemian and natural? Are they all really bold and punchy? What is it that you like about these things? They're really clean, simple shapes. They're clever, and I think that's a really helpful place. But, a good brand designer or a brand agency, they will guide you through the process. So, but I think, just realizing that it's, not basically getting that email from them with the drafts and then immediately pulling up Instagram to see if that's what the kind of thing you're seeing on there and if that tallies with your mood board, because you'll collect more and more references all the time, and it's about making sure that if you've told the person you're working with your brand USP, your exact audience, and how you want to be perceived in the market, how you want to come across, then trust them that they have taken that in mind.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really good point. Like I have a similar in my brand, like I don't do branding, but in my process of working with me, one of the questions I ask is please give me a minimum of 3 examples of websites you like and why,
Yeah.
so that I can start getting into their head of form, function, design, aesthetic, those kinds of things. I ask lots of questions as well around those types of things, but it is so important.
I
I
think
had another
is really good, because say why you like them, because
Mhm.
that's the other thing. We're talking about subjective things here, and one person's clean and uncluttered is another person's like stark and unfinished.
Yes.
So yeah.
Absolutely. I think one of the other things that I wanted to say was, like, it's so funny you mentioned the like, yes, we can like so many things. I had a client website I started last week, and she won't mind me saying, but she came to me. I do not like with I think 12 different colors she wanted on her website, and I was like, no, it's not how we're gonna do this because it won't create the output that you want. Like it's gonna be too busy, too much going on. And I think a lot of times it's that same thing. Like there's so many times in my mind that I'm like, I love that font. What if I change my accent font to that font? But then I go, A, I love my current accent font. B, people have brand recognition of my current accent font. Um, all of these things, right? It can be so easy to get shiny object syndrome almost.
Totally. And I think you can, your brand's got room to evolve.
Mm,
But it's like, for example, with your accent font, if you change that every week and you went for a really elegant serif one week, and then you went for a handwritten font, and then you went for like a more weddingy, elegant script font, and then,
mhm.
you went for something all caps and like a poster, it really creates a lot of like uncertainty and confusion for your audience. And also it basically it says to them, I don't really know who I am because I'm just toying about. And it's so easy to do, because if you load up Canva, it makes it easy. It makes it look like there are all these templates, and you might think, oh, that's interesting. I've never done that. I like this one with a gradient and a phone held in the middle. But actually, if all of your brand is your solid burgundy or whatever, having this sort of pastel gradient, it's not really going to fit with your brand. And while it might look good there, it fitting with your brand on somebody's busy social media where they follow hundreds, if not thousands of other people, it's more important.
Yeah. And I think the thing is that point that you said it, if you don't look like you know who you are, how is anybody going to trust you with your business?
Exactly.
Because they're not going to know who you are.
That's it. I mean, also, it's like, these things need to be decided relatively intentionally, because, an accent font, especially on websites, we're talking about, if you use it for one word or 2-word headings, it can maybe be a bit more decorative. But if you're using it for blocks of text here and there, then it needs to be easy to read. You
Yes.
don't want to put people off because they can't actually read your website, or it looks too difficult to read. Ultimately, we want people reading our words and connecting.
Absolutely.
So yeah, the fewer barriers in the way of that from a usability point of view, the better.
If I get clients that have a really, if they've come to me, maybe they've DIY'd their brand or something, because I still work with quite a few people who've done that, but the process is always so much nicer if I'm working with somebody who's had their brand done, because it's a really clear, like, this is the direction, right? It just makes it so smooth for me. And but if somebody does come to me with a really hard to read accent font, you're right, I have to be very sparse in where I can put it.
Yeah.
And I have to usually put it in places where it can be nice and big, so that it's very readable, and that it requires code, so that I can turn it off and on in specific places of the site very easily.
Yeah, exactly. It just needs to be really thought through. Yeah, absolutely.
So obviously, and this is something I want to talk. We talked a little bit with the big map of all the things that kind of a brand encompasses, but I think people can really easily go, all right, I have a logo, I have a brand.
Yeah,
Can you
sorry.
talk us through that?
Visuals. Yeah, absolutely. So I think the absolute bare basics would be we've talked about fonts. So I would say basically having some typography, a color palette, and logo. And I will just talk through those in a bit more detail, if that's okay.
Absolutely, please do.
Great. So with the typography just means fonts, but it's basically how your text is going to be laid out. So actually, one thing we do in our branding exercises is we always do either a website mock or a packaging mock, but basically, however the brand is primarily going to be used, we consider that in the design, because that's really important. You pick a font that's difficult, and then it's like, oh, well, actually, this font, it needs to be used on small packaging. It's not going to work. Typography, it's a way of conveying through design the personality of your brand, and it's going to get used a lot, because every page that you have copy, any page that you have text, any blog post, any social media post that you put out that is an information point, it's going to be using those fonts. So there's some logistic things. You want to make sure it is easy to read. We generally tend to do 2 fonts, sometimes 3, but we don't do more because it gets too confusing, because it can be too much playfulness or whatever. So it's a balancing act. But what we would do is we would have a hero font, or a what did you call it earlier? It was really nice. What did you call it?
An accent font?
Yes, your accent font.
Yes.
So we would have a font that is, well, actually, yeah, it can sometimes be like that. So we would have a heading as a basic, absolute bare minimum. We'd have a header font, a body copy font, and we would stipulate a way that you should write call to actions and buttons. Sometimes we add in subheadings and accent fonts for like pull out quotes or things like that. Sometimes they could be within the same family. Sometimes you use the same font in 2 different ways, but usually that's what we would do. We would have, so for example, my brand font actually is Poppins, and it's really,
I love Poppins.
It's like, it's really rounded, but it's clean, it's blocky, it's black, it's easy to read, it's simple. For me, that it made complete sense. One of the things I knew about my branding is I wanted my brand to be in lowercase, because I wanted all the curves and the roundness of my name to come through. And when I found the Poppins font, I really loved it, because actually, while I've got all that wanting to be friendly and warm, actually it's a lot about being quite bold and clean and sharp with the design as well. I'm not sort of all soft and fluffy, so having something more, you know, a brand with a texture in the font or something like that, that just wouldn't work for me. So I use that for my body copy and my headings, but in different weights. And then there's styles. For example, I would always use my headings very oversized and left aligned with a blue full stop. And then that gives me a way to bring my brand in, even just in a headline and copy. So that would be basically your typography. Your color palette is obviously the colors you use in your brand. So this can be anywhere between, I'd say minimum maybe 3 shades and up to maybe 10. But when we've got 10, there's a lot of neutrals and shades of the other shades going on. Usually about 5. We usually devise more for web, actually, ironically, because we usually devise more, especially I've been working with a brand recently, and their brand colors, it's just 2 colors in their palette. It's like an aubergine kind of a burgundy, and a sort of slightly green toned beige, like an olivey color. So they work well together. One's light, one's dark, and we use them inverted. But that can be too heavy on the eye to have such a big block color the darker color. So we've got some tints there that they can use within their brands as well. So it all completely seamlessly works together, and the user doesn't even perceive that there's more colors, but it's just nuances of them.
Right. Yeah, just really quickly, just for anyone out there watching, the Squarespace platform actually only allows you to upload 5 colors. Now there's room for customization through both code and using their font selector and changing a color to a custom color. But they really expect you to have what they have a white, and it doesn't have to be true white, but a white and a black. Then you have your accent color, and then you have sort of a light and a dark. Here I'm all backwards here, but anyway, so you kind of have those 5 colors, and because that's how their system knows how and where to layer things when you're choosing any of the kind of palettes that it auto creates from your brand color, in the way that anyway, you'll watch my Squarespace videos. They're out there. But
no, but I think that's a good point, because it's pretty smart, actually. If you haven't, it's pretty foolproof the way they do it, isn't it? If you didn't have an idea, it gives you a good amount of both. But I would always recommend choosing your colors rather than just going for one of their ready-made palettes, because going for ready-made anything is just a fast track to it being generic by default, because it's not yours. So I think, yeah, personalizing it, I would definitely recommend. But yeah, that's a good sort of basis of what colors you might have or need. And then the last thing I'd say is logos, and I'm going to say logos plural, and I'll explain why. Okay, yay. Okay, because I think so. This gets described in different ways, but recently we've been describing it to clients as like a responsive logo suite. So, or a suite of logos, which is, it means that you have a core logo and we're not changing that, but it's just that you might have different versions for different spaces and different sizes specifically. So it means that you might have a traditionally stacked logo, which is not one that's really muscly. Sorry, that's me trying to be funny. It would be a logo that has like an image central, and then it would have the brand name directly beneath it, nice and large, and then it would have a tagline directly beneath that, slightly smaller. That would be a really traditional stacked logo. So you may, for your website, actually want to have one that doesn't take up quite as much vertical space, because you're stopping people being able to get to your content if you've got like 1.5 inches of logo at the top of your site, and you want it just to fit within 1.5 centimeters to be nice and concise. So you might move what would happen is the designer would provide you with another version with the visual part of it. The icon or the visual is over to the left-hand side, so it's all horizontal. then they might provide you another version where the tagline isn't included, or it's just the icon, or it's a shortened version of the brand name or something like that, because then that version could be used in your website footer. It could be used as your social media icon. There's lots of different usages basically, but it's that way that with the big brands that we buy from all the time, we don't even notice it, but they have 5 or 6 versions of their logo going on. I mean, if you take like Starbucks, they have the logo that they have on the shop front, they have the logo they have on the A-board sign on the street, then they have the branding they have on the actual sleeve of the coffee cup, then they'll have the branding, on the menu, and this is outside of other elements like just using their green and using their font so it all looks part of their brand. I mean, that they'll actually have different versions of their logo. Like even if you pick up a loyalty card, it might have a stamp and it might be the mermaid icon as the stamp. I'm not sure. I actually don't know. But it wouldn't be necessarily as complex of the logo as you might find in a larger space.
Yeah, and it goes like you're making a really good point. So websites, you will probably at the very minimum have the one you have at the top of your website, and then you'll have the one in the browser icon as well at the very top, like at the top of the page.
Exactly. We created
Yeah, the favicon. Squarespace has lovingly changed that to browser icon for non-design type people. But then you, like you said, you would probably have one you're using on social media. You might have one in the footer of your website. You probably have one for your email marketing. And some of these will be the same, but some of them won't. But in the case of Starbucks, it will go all the way from the fact that if you get a sit-in cup at Starbucks, it's a plain white mug that has just the mermaid embossed inside, like it dips into the cup right on the outside here. So they have branded their mugs from there, and then you get all the way up into, the sleeve, the logo outside, and all the different versions. Even if you have like the little like employee wall in some of them, or the like we do good wall, they're still all very much branded to them in really sometimes subtle and sometimes not ways, which is good. It gives that variety.
Yeah, exactly. And I use Starbucks not because I expect every small business to, have the same sort of marketing budget or anything like that, but I think, it's a recognizable reference, and I think it's one of those things that if you when you start noticing, you'll be like, oh yeah, that's a different version of the logo, or it's a slightly smaller one on here, or they've moved the text, or the text goes round the circle in this version. And I mean, from a business point of view, it's actually good because it allows you brand ownership, but also room to grow. So, during the pandemic, I think Starbucks, they did an at-home service. So that was basically, I can't remember exactly what it was. I guess like a delivery or something, but their own brand. But, they had the logo. So all they had to do was they basically got somebody to like just create a new sort of tagline, slightly different font weight, so that it was recognizably a sub brand. And then they've got themselves a ready to go new service. And I think it could be really helpful. You mentioned wellness professionals before. I mean, say if they have a brand and then they run a retreat, or they start doing, they want to do some other kind of work and it needs its own slight identity, then borrowing from the identity that your main brand has is, it means you don't have to start from scratch, and people will recognize that belongs to you.
Right. It's that combination, all these things, when we're saying that they have all these different logos, they're still using the same like images, iconography. They're still using the same fonts, most the same font weights, probably same spacing. So they have variety, but it's still very, very much a visually recognizable brand over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And so you're right. It's creating that variety and the consistency that we've mentioned. It doesn't seem flighty or flaky or like they don't know themselves, even though they have all that variety.
Yeah. And yeah, exactly. So having lots of different versions of the logo, well, not lots of different versions, but having more than one version of your logo can be it just gives you a lot of flexibility that way, that you're not sort of trying to fit, a square in a circle hole, basically. Like you've got a kit there that serves you. So I'd say bare minimum, you would need, as you say, a favicon. So that's really small. I'm looking at yours on your website now, and it's so smart, it's so clean. That's really nice. I just went for mine. I just went for the blue circle because I knew that's far too small for me to really get a meaningful amount of text in there. So I was just like, that's the symbol I will use, people associate it with me. You know, and that's something we do as well, is we think about what's the minimum that could be seen in a browser window, you know, because it's a really small space, but it's one of those things as well. You've got a load of tabs open, and that's where branding, you know, it's subliminal, because you just quickly look through them, but you're taking in all of those brands. So it helps you remember which tab you need to go back to. So that's why it's important, you know, and it makes you look more professional as well.
Absolutely. So are there any kind of hangups that you see quite frequently with branding and websites that we haven't already talked about, or one you want to elaborate on that we have talked about?
Yeah, I think the only thing is, I think it's when people don't have a brand outside of their website, and that's clear to me because I see their social media and it looks different, or their profile picture on social media is a screen grab of their website. It says, I created this, I put that effort into creating this website, and this is my whole business. Your website is a tool in your business. And I think I think that when people do just a website for their whole business, it can be visible to me anyway. I think it's great that when you work with a web designer, I think it's great that I know you and lots of other web designers do this. You do some questioning, and you ask, and you try and distill color palette and brand style and things like that. But actually, you're putting a reasonable amount of pressure on somebody there to kind of work out those things that actually are part of your overall brand strategy, that it'd be good to just work out beforehand.
Oh, so much better. So much better. I will put my hands up. Working, like, I am a website designer. I am not a brand designer. I make that very clear to all of my clients.
Yeah.
So they can come to me with a DIY brand. I'm happy to work with them, but I always prefer it if they've worked with a professional, because it is just always that much better, experience wise for all parties involved, but also for your customer, for what shows up on your website, for how how you're communicating that brand and your values and all of those things. Yeah, put my hands up. I'll say that from the get-go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can we touch on values? Because you mentioned it there about brand values.
Yes, that's your thing for this month. So let's absolutely talk about it, because
It
it's so
is.
important.
It is really important. So yeah, so I'm speaking about it a lot this month. It's my theme for the month, and I chose it because June is Pride Awareness Month, and so it's a time that we see a lot of brands, well, rainbow washing basically,
Yes.
turning their logos rainbow coloured, showing support for Pride, and that's great. But it's whether it's skin deep. However, I'm not going to hark on about that. You can find plenty of that if you want to follow my Instagram. But what I think is really great about websites is using them as an opportunity to share who you are is really valuable. I think one of my favorite pages of any website is always the about page. I always like to see how people have presented themselves, whether it's just you or whether it's a team, whether there's a bit about your story. I think all of that's really, really important. So you know, with my clients, I often work out a bit of a brand story, and then I say to them, it's up to you if you want to share that on your about page or not, you know, because they can sometimes feel a bit vulnerable sharing it. But I know that as a consumer, I love seeing stories, and I love it. Actually, I think this is where website can really bring it to life, using the copy. And like, I've seen some where they've got little Polaroids and it shows their business journey, or it shows, you know, the generations that have been in this business, and it's so effective. And I think it's such an important part of the brand piece, you know, the emotional connection and the trust with the brand. So so I'm all about really good about pages.
Absolutely. I love a good about page. I think, like, one thing that I really encourage most of my clients to do is to think through their values. I usually point them to Ben and Jerry's values page, because the one on their website is incredible. It really shows who they are, what they care about, what causes they're spearheading. And with Ben and Jerry's, we all know it's not stingy. They
Mhm.
put their butts on the line fairly regularly in support of those causes. And yeah, it can be really, really, because we talk all the time in business about how we need to attract the right people, but part
Mm.
of that is often repelling the wrong people. And I think we're so
Mhm.
afraid as business owners sometimes to repel the wrong people, but a strong brand, strong values, strong copy, not being vanilla will turn people who are the wrong fit away, and that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because you want the right kind of leads. You don't want an inbox stuff full of people that aren't your people. Yeah, totally. I always love it. And it's one of the things I sort of collect, as it were, a screen grab whenever I see nice examples on websites. It's when, and I'm just looking at Ben and Jerry's now, their
Mm,
email sign up. They say it's like dessert for your inbox, and they call it the inside scoop. I mean, why? That's genius. That's genius,
I know.
having language like that, having a name for your newsletter, having some copy that, makes it more, uh, interesting for people to want to sign up, giving people more of a reason than just sign up for my newsletter. I think is brilliant, and I think it's a way that you showcase your brand. I think that websites are, for a lot of small business owners, the number one showcase of their business. It's basically their entire storefront. So I think that it's nice to use the opportunities there, to connect, whether, and we've given a couple of examples that are a bit more playful, but any language that you think speaks to your audience is
Exactly.
really useful.
Yeah, it's about being authentic. It doesn't have to be playful, it just has
Yeah,
to be true, right?
absolutely.
And I say this quite a lot, but I firmly believe that you're right. Your website cannot stand alone out there. You have to do other things, and they all need to be consistent. But your website is your home base
Mm,
for your messaging, for your brand, for your communication, for how people access you or purchase from you. And your website is you're the home base for all of that. And in my opinion, and this could be incredibly biased because of what I do, but I do believe that all the other pieces should be pointing back to your website.
mm,
And I think you're right. You have to have consistent social media or whatever that when people then get to your website, they go, "Yep, this is the same place. Like this is the same thing." Or consistent, I've done lots of, your newsletter, same thing, should be consistent. When they get to your website, they think, "Oh, this is the same place." They meet you in person at a networking event or whatever, and they go, "Oh yeah," they get to your website, this is same person, same place. So it's a brand is a sort of a holistic living thing almost. Yes, it's got a very good core, but like at the end of the day, at least for me, I am my brand. So when I first started my business and my same logos, I didn't I didn't swear in my business. Now I swear all the time because I've decided that it's part of who I am, and I don't want someone. I even swear in my copy and things because I don't want someone to hop on a call with me at one stage and me to let an F-bomb fly and then go, "Oh, I didn't know I was working with someone like that." Like, I want them from the very get-go to know who they're getting, and that's me, and
mhm,
I struggle to filter myself even in front of children as much as I love them. So
mhm.
but I don't have any, so I don't hardly have to do it.
Yeah, yeah. No, absolutely. I think that's it. It's like the more you can bring yourself through on your website, the better. Because essentially it's the human element that people are going to connect with. Everyone
Mm,
can make a website. You can go on Squarespace, you can make a website with a template pretty quick, pretty easy. Bringing you to it and making that clear what that is and making it compelling so that somebody takes an action and contacts you or books an appointment or buys something, that's where the magic happens. That's the difference between a website and a business.
that's absolutely true. Well, I want to say thank you so much for coming on and chatting all things brand. You've brought so many good points and so much insight to branding and web and business. But before we go, can you tell everyone where they can find you?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So my website is carabendon.com. It's Cara with a C. And you can find me on Instagram. My handle's just at Cara Bendon. And I'm over on LinkedIn as well. But yeah, basically on my website and Instagram is where I hang out the most.
Oh, fantastic. Well, thank you so much. And I'm gonna sign off. But I really appreciate you so much for showing up and having this conversation with us today.
Thanks for having me. Sorry about the tech issues at the beginning.
No worries, it happens. Last week was a whole thing as well, but I think we've got it sorted now. We know what we're doing.
Brilliant.
Okay. I'm just